Hello again. So, this is a continuation of events of my life and really the story I made up about them. So, there's many characters and people whose lives were involved in this story. And what I'm sharing really only represents my own point of view. And just the same as all of us, the events of our life happen and then we make up a story about them. And that story doesn't reflect everybody else's reality, but it reflects our own. And I've thought about this for a long time, and this is my story. So if it's not the same as somebody else's story that was there, that's okay. I'd like to maybe talk with them and see maybe what I'm missing, because it's all part of the story. Anyway, so when we left off, we were on our way to New Orleans. And it seemed to me that at the time, Starla she was having a lot of just raw energy running through her, and that really wanted to manifest into something. And at the time, she seemed very driven towards this growth and towards achieving like a spiritual power of some kind, and I was looking for that too, sort of a strength and a way of navigating this life in this world in a way that kept me from feeling like I was just a pawn in this scheme of life, and that really what I came to recognize later is I wanted to own my own power as a creator within this world. Now I would recognize that there is only one source of creation, that's commonly called God. But maybe what I call God is different than what you call God, and that's a story for another time. To me, God is the source of all creation, and that the creator, the process of creating, the manifestation of things and events, and the creation are all one. So, me, I am, in obvious form, a creation of this higher power, but within me still lies the power of creation. And each of us, that is true. And the extent in which we own our power of creation shapes how we show up in the world and what we manifest around us. And I was only really beginning to learn that at this time, where we take up in this story. And so I was observing her, and like I said, she had stopped working at the hospital. She was, we were both drinking, maybe her more excessively than I was, but the alcohol was there. But at the time, she really was driven, and she's always been a fiery, driven person, and more particularly in this time than others. And like I said, spontaneously, she came to the idea of going to New Orleans as sort of almost like a spiritual adventure. She was called to action, and she chose to take up on that. And she asked me to join her, and after really only a few hours of deliberation, I sat with it and I decided, yeah, let's do that. And like I said, I wanted something to connect us. I thought that getting away from the place where we'd held our old patterns and a place where we could create new patterns and ways of being might be a good thing. And so we picked up a friend of ours from in Richmond, which was only about 45 minutes away from Charlottesville, and we headed out on the road. And so we drove down, and it was a time of really big excitement. There was that sense of adventure, which is probably something that we all want in our lives, to have a sense of adventure, a calling, a moving forward. And that had been absent in my life in a way, as it has been for many of us. And so, responding to the call for action is one of the elements of a hero's journey, as Joseph Campbell laid out for us. And so, taking this call to action, we headed on down there, and we drove straight through. We stayed over the night somewhere, and we arrived in New Orleans, and very quickly, just we're encountering people that were open, and it seemed that it's a special place, New Orleans, and it's special, and it's amazingly full of potential, and the people there just seemed a lot more real than other places. It's as if they're less inclined to wear a mask to cover up who they really are. And so we found ourselves engaging with people in authentic ways that maybe we wouldn't elsewhere. Maybe we were different. It's hard to say. We encountered some folks who agreed to let us stay with them in their hotel. And they were a young couple like we were, a little bit different. Her profession was she was a call girl, and her husband was he looked out for her. It's an interesting arrangement, not for everybody, but it seemed to be okay for them. And so we stayed in their room, and this, like I mentioned before, this association with good-hearted people that aren't on great paths is something that has happened to me more than once, and it's something that I remain very watchful for now. And in my present life, I am so blessed to have so many authentic, amazing, beautiful, wonderful people who are not only good in heart, but good in deed, in action, and how they show up in the world. And that's something that has been a big takeaway from me, as I've noticed that my failures in life have been where I have dissociated from the people who are of the light and good, and associate with people who don't show up in life in a way that is positive to the greater good. So like I said, thank you for those people that love me and care about me and support me, and I hope none of this is too shocking, but this is my story. And so, hanging out with a prostitute and her husband pimp, basically, and still like those people. I like those people, but maybe they definitely were not the most positive influences at this time. And so we were hanging out with them and running into other people and just having really this open and awesome experience. And still, Starla seemed so raw during all of this, and there was pain in her, and almost a desperateness for something, and I'm not really sure what it was. And again, that's just a story I'm telling myself. Her and I never have had a chance to sit down and recapitulate on all of these things that happened. But she was, again, having these strange encounters where, she would find people and talk with them and connect, but then also start oversharing and becoming aggressive and in general not being connected to people in a heartfelt way or a heart-centered way. And so things were sort of progressing and deteriorating all together at the same time. And it was probably the first night we were there that she decided that she wanted some different drugs. And so she went out looking for some cocaine with the guy we were staying with. And when they went out, she returned with him and another person. And apparently, in a news story where she got slapped in the mouth by somebody in the corner or like on the corner of the street for insisting that they go help her find drugs. And so that's some indication of things that were happening. But this person that she returned with was a person of color who I, um, he just seems really sad and withdrawn into himself. And it was explained to me that this guy had just recently lost his family in a tragic event, and that he, at the time when they encountered him, he was walking out to the levee in New Orleans to commit suicide because life no longer made any sense to him and everything that he loved had been taken from him. And my heart went out to this person, and also, he was somebody who knew the area and he knew people around there, and so I somehow, it made sense to me that he could be part of the journey. He's sort of a guide to the local area and knew the things and whatnot, and that we could do some things together. And so he wound up staying with us as well, and ultimately became a huge character in this story. His name is Michael Hampton, or Darius. He gave two names, one sort of his given name, and then one was the name that he was sort of using to kind of insulate himself from his past. And first, that kind of made sense to me at the time. Turned out there's more to that, but that's to come later. And so this guy, he was our escort, kind of. I mean, he kind of took us around town. He knew the places to go and kind of how to navigate things, and that made sense. And he was also the hookup guy for drugs. I tried. I've never really liked the cocaine. I tried it that night. I just found that it made me talk really fast and made me think that I was really important. And so I've tried it a couple times. It's not my bag. But it was for some of the other people in the party. And so it kind of showed up and stayed around and whatnot. And so within a couple of days, we were staying there. And this is not really long after Katrina. And there was so much potential for real estate growth and development. Like I said, at the time, I was a realtor. And so it dawned on us that it was a great idea to move to New Orleans and have this bright new kind of future. But then we also started doing this other thing that people sometimes do, where they think that they can do the wrong things to achieve the right things. And one of those was we thought it would be okay to get involved in selling drugs. And it's embarrassing to say that now, because I couldn't imagine doing that now, or taking any kind of what I'd call an unholy shortcut towards prosperity. But at the time, I was a younger man in my mid-20s, and I was, like a lot of people, disenfranchised about what it takes to get to where I wanted to be. This idea of toiling and working hard for a little bit at a time and a little bit at a time just didn't make sense. I wanted to take a fast track to getting the things that I wanted so that I could do the things that I really wanted to do. And I now, looking back on it, thinking that I wanted to sell drugs so that I could start a positive community of light and growth and spirituality, seems so detached from reality. But I guess that was something that I had to learn in a way that is not the easiest. And that's what we wanted to do. We wanted to create a center or a place where people could grow and live together. Well, not necessarily live together, but learn together and become more tapped in, tuned in, turned on to source and life and all of these things. And I thought that I could do that by surrounding myself with people who didn't know themselves, people that were self destructive, selfish, greedy, and that you could do bad things to get there. And sort of like I said earlier, it was one of those things where the things that you can do and the things that you can live with are not always the same thing. And it's hard for me to be this honest because one of my longtime fears is that that I'm a fraud in a way, and those actions that I committed to definitely made me feel like a fraud. That who I am and how I show up aren't the same. But that's where I was at that time. And so we started building these castles in the air of this. We're going to start get dirty money and then put it into real estate and then turn the money into good money and then start doing good things. It's a story that, I didn't come up with this idea. This idea has been around for a long time, and a lot of people have practiced it in different ways. And like I said, I wanted a shortcut to success and prosperity, and what I found was a quick path to ruin. So after some more partying and craziness in that city, New Orleans, which is, like I said, it's an amazing place, but it's a place where light and darkness mingle strongly among people. A lot of people sort of that have a sense of the energy of things say that, like in New Orleans, the veil between this world and the world of spirit is thinner there, and that allows it to influence you in greater ways than it might in a place that's the veil is not so thin. However, so we wound up leaving, and sadly, sort of, we left one person behind to his own means who didn't seem like he was going to be of much support. And then and I apologize to you for that. If you ever see this, sorry. And we brought Darius back with us to Charlottesville, Virginia, with the intent of essentially closing down our lives there and moving on to New Orleans to start this new life. So we go and hit the road back, get caught in a freak snowstorm and have to get off the road, stay overnight, and then finish our journey back to Charlottesville. And from there, our intent was to get our condo. We were remodeling it and only had a few punch list things to do, really, before we get done with it. I mean, tile the bathroom, put up some trim and little things, and then our house would be pretty marketable. And so that's what we were looking at doing. We were going to sell our condo, liquidate our assets, and get down to New Orleans. Well, our condo kind of turned into a flop house pretty quick of sort of people on the lower end of not only economically, but people who were in drugs and drinking and people who were willing to do ungood things for whatever means necessary. And while we were there, strange things happened that some things I don't really know about. One thing that happened is that her car was um, apparently stolen in the middle of the night. But at the same time, well, that car was stolen. A set of keys turned up missing as well. And as an effect, she went and spoke to the law enforcement and reported the theft, and eventually the insurance came through and paid for that car. And we never did make progress on getting that condo ready. Her focus really seemed to be more on self-indulgence and partying, and really her what appeared to be a slide into a real big breakdown kept coming along, to the point where it was harder and harder for me to associate with her. And even I remember her family being concerned about the darkness that was starting to show through her. And as this was happening and her getting lashing out, insulting, threatening, to myself and to other people, guests of our house, just really started to get to a point where I was no longer comfortable just sort of being in the flow of things. Like, I didn't feel like things were going to just be okay. And there's many events that that happened along with this, and eventually there was just a big blowout between the two of us. And she asked me what I wanted, and I told her I wanted her gone. And so she, in the next day or two, she left to New Orleans first with the intention that we would rendezvous together and work things out. In reality, at that time, I didn't want to work anything out with her. I just wanted her to go away and be gone. And And so a friend of hers, took her and put her on a train to New Orleans. And apparently, somewhere down the track, she got into a fight with one of the passengers on the train. The passengers' trespass was that they refused to share their food with her. And Starla lashed out at this person, things escalated, and they threw her off the train. And she wound up catching a Greyhound bus, and the bus driver kind of talked her down, apparently, and kind of put her in her place a bit. And she humbly made it all the way down to New Orleans. And so meanwhile, there was this woman that I had been interested in for a while, and I got in contact with her, and we had a very, it seemed like a wonderful connection, and it really was. And ultimately, my actions and the things that led to me being incarcerated just absolutely hurt and devastated that person, and I apologize